Pick a move in the ring. You can hit me with a word you fling.
What's up, everybody? It's the Post-Fight Podcast. We are back, hopefully a little bit more upbeat today after yesterday's One Championship podcast and all the horrible stuff that's going on there. Because here we're going to preview UFC Fight Night. They're back in Las Vegas. We got Curtis Blaydes against Alexander Volkov, and I'm here with John Honko, JHK, and Chris EB. Guys, how are you doing today?
Good, man. How you guys doing?
I'm good, man. All the way from sunny Kowloon. Whoop, whoop.
Sunny Kowloon, yeah, it's very nice here in Hong Kong today. But let's get down to it. We're going to start with the main card of this show. So we'll jump right in. Roosevelt Roberts against Jim Miller. Right, John, first, you give me your pick.
I'm going to take Jim Miller. I'm going to take Jim Miller because I feel like Jim Miller's going to come in and turn the clock back and get a good submission win over Roosevelt Roberts. I know Roosevelt Roberts is a tricky fighter, and he's coming off that big win against Brock Weaver, less than a month ago. And he looked phenomenal, but it seems like every time we count out Jim Miller comes back and gets a big win. You know, he'll lose a couple and then come back and get a big win. That's the pattern that he's living right now as a Well, how old is he right now? He's 36 years old. That's crazy because he has a total of 45, 46 fights, and he's still rocking strong. You know, he's coming off a decision loss, but I don't care. He's going to come back. He's going to come back and win this fight, and I feel like he has the all-around skill set, and his durability is going to be there for him. So, yeah, I'm picking Jim Miller for this fight. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough one to call. I think Roosevelt Roberts is absolutely fantastic. I think he's the taller guy, the more rangy guy, fantastic on the regional circuit. His striking is absolutely fantastic. He hasn't really got that knockout power, and he very much likes to go to decision. But my one issue here is I think the turnaround could be a little bit too much. I know he didn't take too much damage against Brock Weaver, but the thing with weight cutting, preparing for a fight, having a fight camp, I think that might just prove to be a little bit too much. I think if they both would have had 6 months, I would bet the house on Roosevelt Roberts, but I think it's going to be very close. I think maybe Jim Miller might finish it. I think if we get to decision, I think if Roosevelt Roberts can find his groove and keep his cardio high and just keep going, he should be able to outscore him. But I do have to think this is not the perfect time frame for another fight.
Well, let's move on up this card then. Don't want to keep it too long. Limangood against Belal Muhammad. John, let's start with you again. Who have you got here?
I want to go with Belal Muhammad. The reason why I would choose him over Limangood is because Limangood, he had a coronavirus, and he had it a couple months ago. So I wonder what the effects of him contracting that virus will be in his performance and even in his training. We don't know exactly how much he's been training since his recovery from the virus. I know that he has been training with Shane Burgos, and Shane Burgos is going to come up later on in the card in the co-main event. But I don't know the amount of training that he's done. And Belal Muhammad, that guy's a rough fight for anybody. And he's a scrapper. And Limangood, if he's not 100% healthy, I feel like Muhammad's going to go in there and demolish him. But Limangood, it's a toss-up, this fight. This fight is it's hard to choose.
Yeah, Chris, you see any way for Limangood through here?
I wouldn't be surprised to see Limangood sneak some sort of decision. I think he's a really, really technical fighter. He generally does not get finished. I think he's had 5 losses on his record. Yeah, and I think of those 5 losses, 4 were by decision, and he's only lost once by submission. Belal Muhammad does have some holes in his game, and I would actually go with Limangood. I know he's the betting underdog, but I would probably bet on him if I was a betting man.
Yeah, decent fight, isn't it, guys? I think for this card, number 29 welterweight against number 21. We've criticized UFC for some of these cards, but I think this is an entertaining matchup, wouldn't you say, John?
Yeah, definitely entertaining. These guys are gonna come out and throw bombs, and it's highly likely that this fight will go to the ground. They'll be scrambling around, and I give the advantage to Mohammed if it does go to the ground. The last time Limangood lost was to Damian Maia by submission. So
Yeah.
I think everybody gets submitted by Damian Maia, but maybe that's a little crack in his armor. And if Bilal Muhammad can go in there and get into those scrambles, I feel like he has the advantages for this fight. But it's going to be a wild fight. I don't know if it's going to end in the first round or the second round, but it could go 3 rounds and it could just be nasty.
Well, all right, let's move on up here. I'm trying to bring it up on the screen. Sorry. Here you go. Raquel Pennington against Marion Renault. Chris, why don't we start with you this time? Who you got in this one?
I think this is an absolutely fantastic women's fight. I really, really respect Raquel Pennington. I think anyone who looks at her record and says anything bad about her hasn't really looked at the people she's fought. She is a top level fighter. She's just not in that world-class, world champion level caliber. If you look at her recent losses, I think it's Holly Holm twice, Jermaine Durandamy, she lost to Amanda Nunes. She went 1-on-1, I think, with Jessica Andrade. So she's a very capable fighter. I think she has a lot more to her. I think Marion Renault, everything I've seen of her, all of her fights, I think she's not of a level to really trouble Raquel Pennington. And I think Raquel Pennington gets it done in the first or the second.
John, you going for Raquel as well?
It's hard to pick this one. The reason why is I have a lot of doubt in both of these women. The first, Raquel Pennington, she's been around for a long time, right? She's lost to the best, and she's also beat one of the best, which is Irene Aldana, who is pretty much the #1 contender at bantamweight right now, right? She does have a fight lined up, but a lot of people believe when she knocked out Caitlin Vieira, she proved that she is the #1 contender, and Raquel Pennington beat her by split decision. So we'll see if that is if that's the same Raquel Pennington we're gonna see in this fight against Marion Renault. But yeah, and also Marion Renault, she's like 42 years old. I think she's the oldest woman in the UFC.
She will be 43 on the day of the fight.
Yeah. Oh, really? And she's fighting on her birthday?
Yep, she's 2 years younger than Anderson Silva.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. And she's still fighting at that level. Yeah, the age is also a factor. Motivation is a factor on Raquel Pennington's side. I don't know if she's still hungry to become a title fight, because hungry to become a title challenger. Because you remember when she did fight for the title. Do you remember that fight? Like, she was gonna quit. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, she was gonna quit in the middle of that fight. She actually said to her corner that, I didn't want to fight anymore, and her corner pushed her back out there, and that was a whole nother controversy of corner stoppages. But yeah, it's hard for me to pick. But if I'm gonna pick somebody, I'm gonna go with the throwback, just like Jim Miller, and go with Marion Renault in this one by decision.
You mentioned Raquel Pennington and that title fight. Does a win here really do anything for Rocky in this bantamweight division? Or it's number 10, isn't it?
I think it does do something for her. If she does get the win here, it keeps her relevant. And let's be honest, if you keep her away from the Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, and the Nunes, she can fight with almost everyone else in the division. I mean, that number 6 to her next to her name is one of the few times I look at the UFC rankings and go, they've placed her in the exact right position. She's just outside that top 5, but she is the kind of person you have to go through if you want to get a title shot. I mean, you can't really disagree with that.
Yeah, she is the ultimate gatekeeper. If you wanna, and that's saying it in the most polite way, right?
I wouldn't even.
You wouldn't say it in the polite way.
I wouldn't even say she's a gatekeeper. I think she's the first person you beat once you're in the gate. I think she's like just there in the gate. I think she's the security guard.
Security guard.
Yeah, she's the security guard with the Rottweiler. You know, she's there. She's going to give you a tough time. But if you want to go and beat the boss at the end of the level, you got to get through her first.
All right. I feel that. I dig it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is actually a better definition of what her role is in division. If she could beat Marin Renault and then get maybe a rematch with Holly Holm or with Germaine de Randamie and get a win, then that puts her right there in the top, right? In the top 5 in the division. If she's motivated, if she really wants to go up to challenge the title for the title. And if Amanda Nunes decides to retire, that could actually be good for Raquel Pennington. You know what I mean? Because that was kind of like the big boss at the end of the road, right? For Raquel Pennington, she couldn't get over that hump. But if Amanda Nunes is not there, maybe that gives her a new boost of confidence, and she could make that run for the title. Who knows what could happen after this fight?
All right, moving on, I guess. Also, I've got to say thank you, by the way, to Tapology, because we're using all their stats and their site here. So thanks, guys. Yeah, co-main event, Josh Emmett versus Shane Burgos. Guys, who have you got? I guess we'll start with Chris again.
I think this is a fantastic fight. I think this is a fantastic co-main. 2 people who are very, very competent, great records. They deserve to be on a co-main. They deserve the exposure that they will get. I think it's a really, really tough one to call. It is probably the closest fight of the night on the main card. It's a little bit of a flick of the coin. And in that reason, I would just go for Shane Burgos if I was a betting man, as you're going to get better odds. He's the underdog. And I think when it's a flip of a coin, I always go for the underdog.
Yeah, John, number 8 featherweight against number 11 featherweight. It's pretty close, isn't it, on paper?
Oh, it's a gunfight. It's a duel. It's like a Clint Eastwood movie, you know, when they go out there face to face and they pull out what they got strapped to their hip. And what Josh Emmett has that Shane Burgos does not have is a shotgun. You know, he got that one-hitter quitter that he could land at any moment. He showed you in his last fight against Michael Johnson. He was losing that fight, and in the 3rd round, bang, out, like folded like a lawn chair. Michael Johnson was gone, right? And that's what Josh Emmett has. Josh Emmett could just coast and then at any moment, you know, turn the lights out. But on the flip side, Shane Burgos, I look at him as someone like, you know, with the pistols, right? He can hit hard, but he could also have he can hit with speed and accuracy, and that could accumulate into a lot of damage. And that's what's the interesting aspect of this fight is Josh Emmett going to land that one big hit, or is Shane Burgos going to be able to keep his distance, use his kicks, you know, use that calf kick and land jabs, land hooks, land combinations from distance, and not get close enough to where Emmett can launch that missile into his face. And that's what's intriguing about this matchup. That's what everybody's excited about. That's why everybody loves this matchup, because that factor is there, and anybody could win this fight at any moment. I'm picking. Man, it's so hard to pick this one because I interviewed both these guys before this fight, and man, just talking to them and being able to ask questions that I want to know about and learning about these guys is just, it's just like, man, I just wonder myself, and it's hard for me to pick. But if I did have to pick, I'll take Josh Emmett. I feel like Josh Emmett has more experience with big fights and higher caliber, higher ranked opponents. And and that one-hitter quitter. It's
that is my one issue with Burgos going into this fight, is that really the only high-level opponent he has really fought so far, in my opinion, would be Calvin Kattar, and he lost to him. I don't know if you count his Cub Swanson fight as high level. Cub Swanson isn't quite where he was. So, but I think it can really go both ways, and I think it's going to be a 3-rounder, and touchwood, there's going to be a lot of blood, I think.
What do we think of this, though? Josh Emmett, 35 years old. Shane Burgos, 29. Josh Emmett, 5'6". Shane Burgos, 5'11". A lot of advantages on paper for Shane Burgos, right?
Yeah, on paper, but he might be able to utilize that range. But you mean they're at the same weight. So Josh Emmett does have a lot more power. does probably have a bit more of an all-even game, bit better ground game, bit better wrestling. Shane Burgos is a fantastic striker, and I think he will try to use the range. And it all just depends on if Josh Emmett really can close the distance, put some feints in, and use footwork to get on the inside.
One other interesting aspect about this is Shane Burgos, when he prepares for a fight, he diets down during the camp. So when he actually enters fight week, he says he only cuts like maybe 5 pounds or so. So
Wow.
it's pretty much nothing. But one thing about Josh Emmett that's different is he's pretty big for the division, and he does cut a lot of weight. And I'm just intrigued by if that will become a factor. And maybe could somebody miss weight in this fight? I don't know. But if they do, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You know what I mean? I'm not saying the fight will fall out, but I'm saying like what can be the repercussions of Josh Emmett not making the weight and maybe struggling to make the weight. It could be a factor that benefits Burgos, because Burgos, he's pretty lean and tall. But once they get into that cage, man, it's fireworks. That's all that matters.
All right, should be a fun main event too that we've got here. Curtis Blaydes against Alexander Volkov. Always love a heavyweight scrap, don't we, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. And especially, it's once again in a smaller cage. It's going to be very explosive. I think it's a great main event. Both of them are top level guys, fought against almost everyone in the division. If I had to pick someone in this fight, it is Curtis Blaydes. I think he's got far more ways to win. He's got power, he's got boxing, he's got wrestling. He's just a fantastic athlete. And he probably is the fourth best heavyweight in the world right now.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree with you, Chris.
Yeah.
I actually talked with Curtis Blaydes. He represents Elevation Fight Team, and I've spoke with his one of his coaches, his striking coach, Sean Madden, a couple of days ago, and he was telling me that he predicts Curtis goes in there and just dumps Volkov on his back and just pounds a hole in his face at the latest second round. And he said it so convincingly that I believe him. You know what I mean? If you look back at what Curtis Blaydes has done, the only person he's lost to is Francis Ngannou twice, right? And the second time he lost to him, after that, he's ran through 3 fighters. He destroyed Justin Willis, someone he really hated, and that was fun to watch. And then he grounded and pounded out Shamil. And then in his last fight, he actually took out Junior Dos Santos with his boxing and his stand-up. And it showed different layers of Curtis. So if Curtis goes in there, I don't think he's going to play around. I feel like this guy, he's so focused, and he's just going to go for what will allow him the easiest path to victory. And it's simple. It's dump Volkov on his back and just pound that elbow like he did to Alistar, who is his teammate now, which is interesting too. But anyways, yeah, Volkov, man, he's major underdog, I think, in this fight, just looking at skill set wise. But if you look back at Volkov's performances also, even the one where the only loss Volkov has is to Derek Lewis. I think he's like 6-1 in the UFC. His only loss is Derek Lewis, and he was winning that fight until he got dropped by that big overhand right. But one thing different about a major difference between Derek Lewis and Curtis Blaydes is a phenomenal wrestler. He's an aggressive wrestler, and I think that he's going to go in there and use that and get the finish early in the first round. And I enjoy the first round finishes in the main event also.
I would say third or fourth round for me. I think he's going to tire him out first. I think it's a fantastic fight. And I think the only issue I have is after this, who does Curtis Blaydes fight? He's ranked 4th in the division. I think he would lose against DC. I think he would lose against Stipe. I think he would lose against Ngannou, who are the 3 people ranked above him. And if I was him after this fight, I'd probably be looking to call out maybe Derek Lewis.
Okay, well, let's move on. We've got the prelims as well, guys, don't we? So I'll bring them up on the screen. Let's just see which prelim are you most looking forward to, John?
I'm looking at Frank Camacho versus Matt Frivola. Both these guys come in and bring the heat. I interview both these guys also, and from what they're telling me is like Frank Camacho, he wants to bring back the old Frank Camacho where he goes in there, guns a blazing, but stay calm in the fire. That's the only difference, and show his evolution as a fighter. And on the other side, you got Matt Frivola. He's saying that he's going to use every single part of his body to finish Frank Camacho. If these are what the guys are saying, you know what I mean? It's like, how could you not be hyped about this? Their fighting styles are like fight of the night type material, like skill sets. So I'm hyped for this one. It's gonna be fun to watch, and there's a bunch of other fights too that are exciting here, but that one is my focus. I'm gonna be up at least by that time to watch that one in the morning.
Yeah, Chris, you hyped for this one too?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. And I think people realize that, okay, it's always best to see the best people fight each other, but you actually get the best fights when they're properly matchmade together. And I think this is going to be an absolutely fantastic fight. Really, really hard to pick a clear favorite, absolute back and forward. And I think we'll see everything we love about MMA.
All right, let's look through the rest of these prelims here. Bring it up on screen. Anything else catch your eye, Chris? Gave John his pick. Which one are you looking forward to most on the prelims?
I mean, the one right before the main card is Clay Guida versus
Bobby Green.
Bobby Green. I mean, two veterans who've been through it all. I think Bobby Green has lost 6 out of his last 7. Clay Guida has fought absolutely everyone, absolute veterans. I think Clay Guida's whole career has been win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 1, lose 2, win 1, and dead exciting fighter. Great skill set. I think he's much better suited to featherweight. He looks better. I think he's been with Team Alpha Male at the moment. And I think it'll be a great, great fight. And don't expect to see anything crazy, but I think it will just be really enjoyable and a good back and forward. And we'll just be interesting to see who wins. It'll be interesting to see if Bobby Green could actually get the victory, because what did he come out recently? He was criticizing Dana White again over fighter pay, and had some very interesting things to say.
Yeah, well, that side, John, what's your pick on this one? Are you hyped for this as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. Am I hyped for it? That's kind of an overstatement for me, you know what I mean, personally. I feel like the skill set and the style of fight that Clay Guida brings, it's something that can be the kryptonite of Bobby Green, right? Bobby Green, like Chris said, he's like 1 in 6 or something like that in the UFC, which is pretty insane that he's still sticking around. And he's sitting on a 2-fight losing streak against Jakar Close and Francisco Trinaldo, both unanimous decisions where he was completely outclassed. And I feel Clay Guida could probably do the same exact thing, is go out there and wrestle and strike and just kind of cruise to a decision and keep his job. Bobby Green, I just wonder if his motivation is there. Sometimes when he fights, it just seems like he's not really like in the moment. And then that's why he gets beat most of the time in every fight. Yeah, and man,
Sometimes, I agree. Sometimes with Bobby Green, he does have that thing. If you look at him, and he's not quite Bob Sapp, but you think, oh, you're just there for the paycheck. I mean, Clay Guida, I think anyone should be excited to see him fight. I think he's a dead exciting fighter, and I think to still be where he is and be doing what he's doing within the organization, still putting on good fights. And I think he made his debut at, I want to say, UFC 50 something maybe. He was on the Anderson Silva versus Rich Franklin card, which I think 15 years ago now. So it does show, and he's fought almost everyone. He's fought BJ Penn, he's fought Brian Ortega. So he is that kind of person who just shows us the evolution of the sport, and he shows the different eras within the sport and how it's changed. And to still see someone like that competing, I think is fantastic.
All right, bunch of other fights on this prelims. I'll just run through them quickly. Tisha Torres against Brianna Van Buren. Marc-Andre Barriault versus Oscar Piechota. Courtney Casey v. Jillian Robertson. Roxanne Modafferi v. Lauren Murphy. We should talk about that a little bit. Unless you guys, any other fights there pique your interest? Austin Hubbard as well, v Max Roskopf. Yeah, any of those others catch your eye, or these prelims not too exciting for you guys? Chris, we'll start with you.
It's not the best set of prelims, but then we look at was it 2 weeks ago? Previous weekend, actually. Yeah, last weekend just gone. The prelims looked like absolute dog poo. And then I woke up and watched the first one, and it was knockout after knockout, finish after finish, and it was absolutely fantastic. So, as with anything in this sport, you can't judge a book by its cover. If they're matched made properly, it will always be a good fight. Yeah, I do think the Roxanne Modafferi versus Lauren Murphy fight is absolutely fascinating. Modafferi is such an exciting fighter. She just can never seem to get a run of wins together, but there's just something I really, really like about her. And I don't know if you guys have seen, John did a fantastic interview over on his YouTube, Kumite TV, and she's just an absolute character. I mean, do you get that impression, John, when you interview her? There is something about her, like, she's weird, but like weird in a good way.
Yeah, of course, man. I feel like a lot of people have realized that slowly throughout the years that Roxanne Modafferi is like, she's a fighter, but she's just not the normal fighter. You know, she's not she's cut from a different cloth, so to say. You know, and I'm always rooting for her for some reason. Like, I want her to win and I want her to succeed, and I usually want everybody to succeed, but her is just like, I feel like maybe she has the skill set that could take on Shevchenko. You know, like, it's very awkward but she's very good on the ground, which maybe that, and she got pretty good size on her too. So maybe that could be something in the future. But yeah, you know, Roxanne, she has a big fan base, and we'll see what happens with Lauren Murphy. But what kind of irks me about this is buried on the prelims. But Roxanne Modafferi's ranked, I think, like number 7, and Lauren Murphy's ranked like number 9 in the flyweight division. It's like number 8. And the UFC, it doesn't matter which flyweight it is. It could be the men's or the women's. They're just burying all of them in the prelims. You know what I mean? And it kind of sucks for the ranked fighters. You know, they don't get that exposure. But flip into another topic is a fighter that you guys need to look out for, who took a fight on 5-day notice, is Max Roskopf. He's fighting Austin Hubbard in the first fight. So I'm actually going to wake up to watch this. The reason why is Max Roskopf, he was a Division I wrestler, right? High level wrestler. I talk to wrestlers, you know, like pure wrestlers, and they know him. They know how good he is. And then he's the type of guy, while he was wrestling in college, he immersed himself in jiu-jitsu. So he has that strong wrestling base, but then also he's been learning jiu-jitsu for like years and years and years. And then he transitioned over to MMA. Now he's in Vegas. He's coached by Robert Drysdale. If you know anything about jiu-jitsu, you know Robert Drysdale. And Robert Drysdale also fought in the UFC. And he also trains over at Extreme Couture with Eric Nixick. And if you know Eric Nixick, he's the same guy that coaches Francis Ngannou, Dan Ige, and a couple other, Jessica Ai, a couple other big name fighters over there. And Max is under the tutelage of those great coaches. His background, you know what I mean, his skill set on the ground, he's wrestling, and I feel like there's not many guys like that. Usually the wrestlers, they turn into strikers, right? They don't really lead into the jiu-jitsu world, but this guy's a little bit different. And I actually have an interview with him from a couple of weeks back. You should go check it out. His story is crazy. Like the way he grew up and everything. Just go back and watch it if you're interested in it. But yeah, watch out for this kid. He's undefeated. He might shock a lot of people this weekend.
Yeah, as always, go check out John Hyunko on YouTube. Great interviews all the time. Great content. We love having him on the show. Chris, I know you've been itching to talk about this as well. You mentioned it briefly. There were a lot of knockouts on the prelims last time out, weren't there? And it's got something to do with this smaller cage, right? Is this something you're enjoying? I know I'm enjoying it.
I think it's got something to do with the smaller cage. The statistics says that it's got something to do with the smaller cage. But if you listen to any interview with Dana, Chael, DC, you know, the UFC Fight Nights, they're all saying, no, the cage doesn't really make a difference. We don't have cages and trainings. Some of us only use rings. Some of us only use mats. No cages are the same. Some of us have circles. Some of us have hexagons like in Bellator. But I don't believe them. Let's be honest. This smaller cage is 100% giving us a lot more action in the center. I don't know if it means they are scoring ring control any differently. That'd be interesting to see, to speak to the judges about. I think this is the first time we might see some issues with the smaller cage in the heavyweight fight, because those heavyweights, they're big, big guys, and it's very, very hard to maintain that distance, especially for striking range. And obviously, it will give wrestlers who have a Khabib style of wrestling and getting people against the fence, it's going to favor them. So it probably doesn't affect the flyweights, the bantamweights, the featherweights as much. But as you go up and you get to those light heavyweights, you know, who can be 6'4", 6'5", and some of the heavyweights, you know, you think if you had someone like Stefan Struve in there, who's all limbs, it's like you'd expect him to have a bit more of an advantage. So I think that will be interesting to see.
For the sake of debate, John, are you going to give us a counter argument, or are you loving this smaller cage too?
Of course, I'm going to give the counter argument, right? I'm going to point out something that you guys are not even thinking about. Why are there more finishes in the smaller cage? It could be because it's a smaller cage, but it also could be that most of these fighters are fighting on short notice, and they don't have to go through these long camps, and they don't have enough time to game plan against a lot of their opponents, and what they're basically left to do is to go out there and just fight, and that's leading to some sick knockouts, sick finishes, and at the end of the day, it's a little bit of both. It's a small cage, and it's all the short notice fights where the guys are just going in there and gunning. And I feel like the UFC, they might not say that like publicly, but also the fighters are not going to say it publicly. But I feel like if you lose during this pandemic era, it doesn't really affect you. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to cut anybody for losing right now, for taking fights right now, because all fighters are not taking fights, and some fighters can't even get to the States to fight, or even get to Fight Island to fight. So, yeah, so there's a little bit more job security, right? Even if you lose. So a lot of guys could be going out there and saying, hell, I'm going to go for that bonus. Let's go. And then what do we get? These spectacular finishes.
I have no problem with the smaller cage. I do think it does give you more finishes. My only issue is when it comes to high-ranking people in title fights. I think I prefer either it should be standardized at the top level, or I prefer it that you should have a combination of boxing rings, cages, circles, hexagons. I feel like you should either have the mix of them all, or you should have one and stick to it. That's like my ideal thing. Is like, that's one of my criticisms of one championship. Some fighters always seem to get a cage who have good wrestling, and some fighters always seem to get a ring who are good strikers. And it's like, I can understand if everyone has to alternate, or champions have to alternate their defenses where it is, but that's a problem I get, because if we have some events now where it's a 25-foot cage and some where it's a 30-foot cage, what's to stop people like a Conor McGregor from getting to choose his cage in effect?
Maybe between rounds they could like change the shape and the size of the cage every round. Yeah. Like first round is the big cage, and then they lift it up. Remember in Bellator, they would bring the cage down from the ceiling? Yeah, well, and then lock it in. Maybe they could do that between rounds. In Bellator, they did that.
For some of the Bellator and Bellator kickboxing shows, they have the ring and the cage next to each other. We could try that and have the first, third, and fifth. We could have a coin toss, and you decide if we do the ring in the first round, and then the cage, or the cage and then the ring, and we can go like that. Make it a bit like football.
You could make it like war games in wrestling. You know, remember with the two rings back to back? Maybe there's like a door from the cage that opens into the ring, and they can go between both in the whole fight.
Oh, so you could chase each other around? Or we have three. We have the ring, we have the cage, and then we have the kumite from Bloodsport that like, I don't even know what that's called, a moat or whatever you want to call it, but the cup or whatever. Yeah. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like, if the fights are becoming more entertaining, it doesn't really matter if it's a big cage or a small cage. The finishes are happening, and you know, of course, Dana White says the cage doesn't matter because why? They have another cage. They have a bigger cage. So if the fights were more exciting in a smaller cage, then we would have to argue that, hey, why are they even using the big cage? What's the even point of using it if you're having more exciting fights? Because at the end of the day, that's what the promotion wants. They don't really care about the fighters. They want exciting fights. They want finishes. They don't want decisions. So yeah, that's, of course, they're gonna respond that way. And like you said, the white knights are out.
Yeah, and that's like, I think it has just a much bigger effect. I think we'll see for the heavyweights. I mean, look, if you're a heavyweight fighter like a Curtis Blaydes or someone who's very wrestling heavy, and you're fighting an Ngannou, you want to try and stay out of range as much as possible. But the problem in that smaller cage is it's much harder to stay out of range. And just, I think it'll be a bigger problem for the bigger guys, obviously.
Yeah, I think you alluded to it as well, John, about no one having a proper camp. So a guy's just gassing out after the first round, and that's leading to finishes.
There's a lot of variables in there, you know, but it's all leading to finishes, so it's all good.
Gives us more to talk about.
Yeah, hopefully a few more this weekend. Yeah, thanks as always, guys. Love your analysis. Really appreciate it. Go check out JHK MMA and Chris EB _MMA on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Chris, I believe I'll see you in a few hours for some miniature golf. Is that correct?
Yeah, bring your A game. I've got my little caddy with me, so I think it's going to be an easy win for Chris. It's a couple holes in one.
All right, loser buys beers. Sorry, John, you can't join us because you're in Korea. This is Hong Kong only. But yeah, anyway, man, thanks, guys. And we'll see you again maybe tomorrow. Otherwise, on Sunday when we'll recap all the fights, hopefully. Yeah, cheers, guys. And thanks, everyone, for watching. Please follow SCMP MMA on YouTube, Twitter, everywhere, Facebook. And we'll see you again next time. Cheers.
Hey guys, Sasha Platnikoff here, letting you know to tune in to SCMP Post Fight for all your weekly martial arts news.